Dehydration, heat stroke, hospitalization, even death. The dangers of extreme heat are well documented. I'm Tisha Powell.
And I'm Lee Zurich. We found more people are dying from the effects of scorching temperatures. The latest available numbers show more than 2,000 in 2023.
But what if your job requires you to be outside or in a warehouse with no air conditioning in the middle of the summer?
Reporter Heather Graff explains the concern and shows you one family's devastating loss amid a push to better protect workers from the heat.
The bright blue signage stands out in this somber cemetery.
Every week we got somewhere to go.
And for Jim and Kathy Barber,
could be 2 or 3 times.
That's intentional.
It gives us comfort.
Tributes to their son.
He loved the Bills, was a big fan in them.
Whether it's support for his favorite football team or handmade gifts from his nieces and nephews. Even the engraving on Tim Barber's tombstone.
We had the palette put on there and the brushes because he was an artist.
All of it is focused on how he lived instead of how he died.
No mom and dad should ever get a call like that.
It was July of 2020, and Tim had just been hired as a construction laborer, part of the crew building this bridge in Geneseo, New York.
His first day, he went to work. It was going to be very hot.
Jim and Kathy recall Tim didn't look good when he came home after that first day working in 90-degree temperatures.
Because I didn't get a lunch today. I never got a lot of water today. I said, what?
And he was just very quiet that night.
Lethargic. He didn't say much at dinner.
What this family didn't know, what they couldn't know, is that Tim's second day on the job would kill him.
The last words I said to him, I says, you eat that lunch and you drink that water today.
The Barbers later learned Tim had spent hours sorting bolts in direct sunlight and collapsed as he walked to his car.
He finished his shift, and within an hour he was dead.
An autopsy confirmed the 35-year-old died from hyperthermia, also known as heat-related illness. The U.S. Department of Labor's Occupational Safety and Health Administration investigated and fined Tim's employer, saying the company failed to implement safeguards to protect him. The violation report noted Tim was working alone, with no shade, and was not acclimated to the hot environment, having just started his employment there.
It was totally preventable.
Government data shows workplace deaths caused by heat exposure have increased in recent years, with 55 such deaths in 2023 alone. And the Department of Labor has said nearly 3 out of 4 workers who die from heat-related causes do so in their first week on the job. So, under the Biden administration in 2024, the DOL announced a plan to create the first ever federal protections for people working in extreme heat, both outdoors and indoors, in industries such as construction, agriculture, and manufacturing. The proposed rule would require employers to develop heat acclimatization protocols for new hires, aiming to gradually increase workloads so the body has time to adjust. It would also set trigger points at which employers must take certain steps. When the heat index reaches 80 degrees, they would need to ensure workers have drinking water and allow for rest breaks if needed. And at a heat index of 90 degrees, employers would have to provide at least one 15-minute break every 2 hours and set up a system to monitor staff for signs of heat-related illness.
The reality is that the only way that all workers will be protected, and especially the most vulnerable workers will be protected, is through federal action.
In September of 2024, the then acting Secretary of Labor, Julie Su, hosted a roundtable discussion in Tucson, Arizona, pushing the proposal, but also acknowledging it's still a long way from a done deal. And there is some opposition. For instance, certain industry groups have voiced concerns that a nationwide blanket threshold for heat protections just won't work.
The one-size-fits-all that concerns us is triggers at where the standard kicks in.
Bradley Sant is Vice President of Safety and Education for the American Road and Transportation Builders Association.
At 80 degrees, standards kick in for everybody. Well, that's a little different for the workers in Tucson who work in 80-degree temperatures, 300 days of the year, versus people in Buffalo who work in them maybe 100 days. So we think there needs to be some flexibility in there to allow the employers to keep their workers safe in the conditions that they understand and know well.
If it does take effect as currently written, do you see this ending up in court?
That's a hard one to predict. Likely, it could end up in court.
And on the other side of the debate are organizations like the National Safety Council, where advocates say federal heat standards to protect workers are long overdue.
It is overdue. Heat is becoming a greater and greater contributor to deaths. Heat illness is more and more prevalent in work sites. And as the heat and record-breaking temperatures become the new normal, this threat is only going to grow.
Over here are just photographs of him from growing up over the years.
As for Kathy and Jim Barber,
This was his college graduation.
they will forever wonder, what if heat protections had been mandated on Tim's job site?
If these were implemented, he'd be alive today.
The Barbers would also like to see tougher enforcement and oversight of employers.
Where's the accountability? You got to have some tight policies and say, this is what we're going to do if you don't follow it.
Because if something doesn't change, they fear many more families might end up here,
I miss you every day.
at a gravesite and grieving.
Rest in peace.
It is important to note this Biden-era proposal for worker heat protections was not finalized before he left office. When we reached out to the Department of Labor under the Trump administration, a spokesperson said they had no updates as of February 2025. We also spoke to a professor at American University who has spent decades studying policymaking related to the climate and environment. And I asked if these types of proposals can be difficult to enact.
I've studied so many failed climate policies that have tried to go through the Congress or have tried to come from the executive branch and have been canceled. Historically, there is a ton of precedent for Republicans coming into the White House and getting rid of any climate policies they can.
We can tell you some states have taken action on this. In 2024, Maryland became the 6th state to issue heat illness prevention regulations for workers. Meanwhile, in Florida and Texas, state laws there ban local governments from enacting their own heat safety policies.